Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, so I'm going to introduce this week's guest, Jerry Vieira. Hi, Jerry.
Hello, Adi.
Great to have you on the podcast.
It's lovely to be here.
Good. And Jerry, I am so excited to have Jerry on because I'm going to explain all the wonderful things that Jerry does, but he's a dear friend of mine as well. And it's always great to have a friend and somebody that I appreciate and admire so much as a guest. So Jerry is a certified management consultant, and he is the founder and CEO of the QMP Group. And he's been helping businesses for over 30 years create breakthrough marketing strategies and develop the engine for their sales and marketing processes. So we're all about processes, and that's why you are here today, Jerry. You're an engineer. You're an author of 2 books and one on the way, and here is one of the books right here. The Consultancy Navigator, excellent book. You are an awesome person, great sense of humor, and I'm sure our listeners will be able to enjoy that today as well. So first of all, before we dive into the understanding about the difference between marketing strategy, business development, sales, marketing tactics, and how it all ties into processes, is there anything that I left in terms of introducing you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Good job.
Let's start talking about what is the difference between marketing strategy, business development, marketing tactics, and sales.
Well, let's start by talking about what I believe the general public considers marketing and marketing strategy. Now, there is a difference between marketing strategy and market strategy. So let's talk about things like advertising, promotion, marketing automation, social media, branding programs, trade shows. That is the concept of what most people consider marketing. That I've grouped into the category of tactical marketing. Mm-hmm. All of that is very expensive and shouldn't be embarked upon until you know you have a sound market strategy. So in terms of process, the first step is always to formulate a market strategy before you commit lots and lots of money to the tactical marketing activities that I went through: the advertising, e-promotion, trade shows, branding, social media, and marketing automation. So now let's go to the step 1, which is, what is market strategy? Mm-hmm. Well, market strategy centers around 4 or 5 different parts that need to be crafted and sewn together to make sure that the business initiative you're going to embark on will be successful. So obviously, one needs to understand what the client or customer problem is that you're trying to solve. I call it a POG, a P-O-G, a problem that the client may have, an opportunity that the client might be able to avail themselves of.
So POG stands for?
Pardon me?
What does POG stands for?
Problem, opportunity, or gap.
Okay.
Gap. And the gap is some performance deficiency that the client or the customer needs to improve. So the first thing that one must understand when you're setting a market strategy is, what is the client's POG, and how can you formulate an offering, a product or a service or a combination to solve that, and how much will that be worth to the client? If you don't have those few components understood, you don't know how to develop your product appropriately. You don't know how to communicate it through the tactical marketing problem. You don't know how your sales guy is going to qualify it. And so that's very important to understand the customer POG. In fact, a very famous marketer once said, give me $1 million worth of marketing research or a day in the kitchen with a housewife, and I'll take the day in the kitchen with the housewife, because that way he could relate firsthand to the challenges that the housewife, and that marketer was Peter Drucker. And the time, or the historical era in which he said that, was obviously the 1950s, when housewives were mostly stay at home. But his point was, you need to be able to relate specifically to the POG, the client POG, before you can develop a product. The second thing that market strategy needs to do is identify the market segment, which groups of customers your POG mostly relates to, and which group of customers are going to get the highest value from dealing or availing themselves of a solution for that POG. And that's a market selection challenge, a target market selection challenge. Some people call it market segmentation. No product delivers equal value across all customer bases. What you want to do is be able to focus your product or service on segments of the market that will receive the highest value from it. And all of that has to do with identifying the value quotient. A value quotient is benefits divided by costs. And everybody has a different relationship. Everybody sees a different set of benefits from your offering and experiences a different set of costs. It's obvious that you want to aim your offering, when you introduce it, at a segment of the market that receives the highest value. They have the highest benefits for the lowest costs. So that's all market selection. So what we've got is understand the POG, understand the value quotient, understand the target market so that you can communicate that to your sales force and to your tactical marketing team. The last two parts of market strategy have to do with making sure that your offering is significantly differentiated from other approaches that a client might take to resolve their POG. Now, people think of competition as other companies, but sometimes competition is do nothing. Client has an option to do nothing or do it themselves. And finally, the thing that you must do is you must select a good channel to market, whether it's a direct channel, a distribution channel, a set of independent sales representatives, or even the internet. The internet is just an automated channel to market. So the tactics or the activities involved in market strategy are significantly different and need to be in place before you invest a lot of money in the tactical marketing programs.
Right. So you have to have that market strategy, which will be like the top part. So then all the activities align to that. So Who do you recommend should be involved in creating that market strategy in terms of within the organization? Depends obviously on the size, but give me some ideas of who do you think who is a must that has to be part of that market strategy development?
Well, it depends on the size of the company. Sometimes it can be relegated, but the general manager of a business or a business owner, particularly in the mid-market clients that I service, needs to be involved in making the ultimate decision. And you only need one or two people who are well-versed in market strategy to be able to do that work. And you can have a director of strategic marketing or a manager of strategic marketing. Or maybe if the individual understands his role, what I consider appropriately, the vice president of marketing and sales can be that person. But he will typically relegate things like the research into the POG to other people. But there has to be at least one individual who is extremely familiar and experienced in formulating market strategies. And no decision should be made in tactical marketing, particularly economic investment, until that strategy is not only formulated, but tested.
Right, that makes sense. So
let me add one more thing.
Yeah.
The process of formulating market strategy needs data. And that data, the most data that's available, come from the sales team, because the sales team is engaging with clients on a daily basis and understanding their situation. There are very, very few, and it's sad, very, very few clients that I come across that have a formal process for collecting and processing and analyzing sales data and historical sales data to be able to feed that into the market strategy development process.
So what do you do when you don't have data? How do you overcome that?
Well, as a consultant, what I do is I first do the analysis. I dive in personally and do interviews with salespeople and look at the sales reports and the sales history and run the analysis and see what it tells me. What also I do is I work with the sales manager to try to get the salespeople to start to deliver that data into the market strategist's hands. Now, if there's no market strategist, then that's another problem, right? If all you have is a tactical marketing specialist that doesn't understand market strategy, then there's a gap. So one of the things that I do is I help them recruit somebody to be that role or go on a retainer to do it myself.
So that would be like your POG, right? Or your POG when you look at a client in terms of like, this is one of the gaps that exists for your client, whether they have somebody there or not, right?
Yeah. It's very common to not have that in place.
Right. Okay, good. So those are the 5 points for a market strategy, how to do a correct market strategy. Right. So now that we understand that, let's dive in a little bit farther in terms of the difference between new business development, marketing tactics, and sales, and the differentiation between them, because it's a different set of processes for each one of them, right? I mean, sure. Different procedures, different processes, it's different parts of that have to be in place, but they have to be identified as different.
Right. So let's talk about sales and new business development. Sales activities are typically opportunity or new account related. There are 3 roles that salespeople might have. One is being a new opportunity closer, somebody that sees an opportunity, works with the client, comes up with a solution, and closes the deal. Or it can be an account management, which is maintaining large accounts and making sure that they're constantly happy, or going after brand new accounts. So the things that are required is a salesperson must know how to qualify appropriate opportunities. They need to be able to discover the circumstances around it and the needs, the details, so that they can deliver a proposal or a quote. They need to formulate the proposal or the quote. They need to follow through and close. They need to manage their pipeline. So it's really, the sales guy is very tactical in terms of finding an opportunity, qualifying it, and shepherding it through the pipeline, sales pipeline. In order to feed the front end of the salesperson's pipeline for the individual to qualify, it's interesting because the research I've done with clients is that the tactical marketing feeds the front end of the pipeline very poorly. The number of leads that actually come from tactical marketing initiatives is very low, particularly in service-oriented mid-sized businesses.
So where would it affect then, the tactical marketing, if it doesn't affect the front line? Where do you actually see the effect of it?
In branding, in getting an identity and a name. So I remember when I worked for a very large semiconductor firm, when I would call a client and say that I was from that firm, they would immediately pick up the phone and listen, because it had a strong brand and a wonderful technology reputation. So anyway, there's the place that new opportunities really come from for salespeople is their networking, their referral sources, their thought leadership, talks and things that they might give, alliances that they may develop with people that offer. New business development is really the task associated with finding multiple sources of opportunities. So let's say that you and I have a relationship, an alliance relationship. You would be, since you have lots of clients, you would be able to refer them appropriately to me and I to you. So the new business development activity is formulating those connections, those channels to gain multiple opportunities. And that can come, like I say, from networking, alliances, referral sources, the development of referral sources, and then working in what I call the intra-market network. So if you're selling into the construction industry, then you want to involve yourself in the construction industry, trade shows, events, and
or associations, etc.
Association, yes.
Yeah.
So new business development is developing those sources of multiple opportunities, and sales is identifying how to get one opportunity through the pipeline to a close, qualified, discovered, formulated, proposed, quoted, and closed.
Those are great definitions. And Jerry, from your experience, do you see that, is it smart to separate business development from sales, or do you see also successful organizations that have the person that basically gathers? It's like the gathering and the hunting, right? Because business development is all about relationship building. Not that sales is not, but it's kind of like you are gathering those communication lines. You are gathering the people. You're gathering you are part of organizations, and you gather basically, those are communication lines between people, right? You have like the people that you know and the center of influence, etc. Do you also think that, or have you seen that the business development can also tie into the sales? So basically you gather the people that you know and you network, but can you also go for the hunting of the actual close?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And the answer is yes. In fact, if most of the sales people in the companies that I consult with, if they had to depend just on the tactical marketing to feed the leads to their pipeline, they would starve, right? So in the normal human nature, they do the new business development themselves. But the emphasis in general is on selling, and sales management, sales and marketing management need to make sure that the salespeople are doing the new business development activities and measure that with the same degree of intensity and importance as they do the pipeline movements. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah.
Now, some of those new business development activities can fall into the tactical marketing realm. So things like doing target account research, or doing talks, and writing blogs, and doing webinars. All of those things kind of wash into marketing. They can, but if it doesn't, then it's definitely within the expectation of a salesperson to do those things, and to be expected, and having goals to set the number of things that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is part of the tactics, because, you have a market strategy, then you have the tactics of, like, let's say one of the tactics will be, we're going to create a podcast or a blog or a webinar. So that's the tactics, but it does fit. It's not like a separated silo. I mean, it fits into the business development. I think it's what you do with it, right? Because as a marketing tactics, you can record a webinar. But then what do you do with it? Do you just keep it on your website somewhere, or do you give it to all your salespeople to actually write to their best prospects and say, hey, look at this webinar. Here is some information about what we talked, right? So
if a salesperson is resourceful, that's exactly what they would do.
Yeah.
They would use it and say, okay, this really applies to these people or these businesses that are in my sales pipeline or that I'm trying to develop. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to be a resource person to provide the business development information that comes from webinars, podcasts, articles, and talks to the people that will benefit from it, right?
Right.
And salespeople that are most successful are the salespeople that behave like sales resource persons.
Right. It's the transactional as opposed to the building the relationship, right? Because you are helping. It's all about helping. If the salesperson helps by using the marketing collateral that was built correctly according to a market strategy, it will all fall into place because you are actually communicating to the customer about the problems that they're having, about any gaps, about opportunities, and you are actually communicating intelligently as opposed to just throwing something there that they don't need and they don't want to listen to you.
Right. In fact, excuse me, Adi. In fact, my second book is called Navigational Selling. And one of the working titles that I looked at was Help, Not Hype Selling. It's not appropriate for salespeople to just be hypers. They need to be helpers.
Mm-hmm. It's true. That's very true. So what is your thought about, online advertising, like the PPC, the SEO? Do you think that there is a room for it or a place for it for specific industries? Like, let's say, for instance, for the trades, right? I mean, if something breaks in your house and it's more like the consumer, but in terms of the B2B arena, is there a place for online marketing?
Yes. There's a concept called the intra-market network or a market ecosystem. That's defined by the decision makers and where they hang out and what they read and what they view. If you can tap into a specific intra-market network, for example, if you were selling Gulf repair services, you'd want to promote in magazines or online forums or advertise on the website of country clubs, right? So you need to make sure that you focus, and that's the key. The key is to understand the POG market segment and then understand how to get your message driven through that. Adi, you and I are both members of Vistage, and that's a peer group of CEOs. And since I sell my services to the decision makers, which are business owners or executives in charge, the talks that I try to give in Vistage forums where groups of those people gather, and they can refer one to another,
right,
based on a trusted thing. So this intramarket network is one of the things that either a salesperson or a new business development should do. And on the list of things that new business development does is called network mapping, intramarket network mapping, so that you can direct the salespeople and the tactical marketing to those networks. In fact, research into the adoption of innovation has shown that messages delivered through an intramarket network is 13 times, I'll repeat it, 13 times more impactful than mass communications.
Wow, you have to repeat this again.
Messages delivered through an intramarket network, a peer-to-peer intramarket network, is 13 times more impactful than mass communications from tactical marketing. In other words,
I
if
totally
you try
believe
to cover
it.
the universe. And so in 30 years, I've never done any tactical marketing for myself. I mean, other than a website, I've never done any promotional tactical marketing. But I've done a lot of intramarket networking. And that has truly been the source of my business, which has kept me uncomfortably overweight for all that time.
Well, I told our listeners you have a sense of humor, so now it comes up. But well, Jerry, so let's talk about that. So what
my weight?
What is your favorite? Not your weight. We can talk about that too, but let's talk about what are some of your successful processes for yourself in terms of the intra-network marketing that proved successful throughout the years?
Probably the most effective technique I've used is a gap analysis or an assessment. If you understand the business type of businesses that are your ideal targets and in what segments, you can identify, let's say, 8 dimensions of performance and then design an assessment to identify gaps that these companies might have in their assessment. So when I give an assessment, it usually has to do with how well is their market strategy process? How well is their working? How well is their new business development process? How good is their sales process? How good is their market intelligence gathering, right? How good is their channel to market? So I have 8 dimensions, and I give this to a prospective client to self-assess. And that tells me where they believe their gaps are,
Right.
what they believe their gaps are. And then I follow that up with typically 3 questions. How much do you think over the last, let's say, 5 years, that gap has cost you in terms of foregone revenue or profits? That's the first question. The second question is, what situations would you be in if your competitors weren't dealing with that gap? And the third question is, if someone were to come and try to buy your business, and during their due diligence, they found these gaps, would your business be worth more or less? Right? And the answer is obviously it'll be worth less if the gaps are significant and it's in a critical process. So those 3 questions usually help coalesce and crystallize the implications of these gaps, and
Right.
usually motivate a client to want to do something about it. Whether they decide to do it themselves, decide to buy it from somebody else, or decide to have me help them close those gaps, doesn't really make any difference. I've accomplished what I need to do is I've helped them identify it. And if they take action, then they'll be better off.
Wow, that's incredible. So that gap analysis is very important. So if we have any listeners right now that are listening to us and they go, yeah, I want to know about that gap analysis, I want to do a gap analysis, how can they contact you?
Well, they can call me 503-318-2696. That's 503-318-2696. And if they tell me the kind of business they're in, I have literally dozens of different assessments. I can find one that is most appropriate to what they believe their challenges are, and just kind of hand it off to them. And the only obligation they have is to return it, is to take it and return it.
Wow.
If they don't, they go on my blacklist.
A free gap analysis. I love it. That's so generous of you to do that. And now we also learned the 3 questions that they can answer. So I definitely encourage our listeners to reach out to Jerry. And also I will include your email because some people maybe don't like to pick up the phone and they want to email you, so they can email as well. And we'll include that in the show notes. So definitely let's reach out to Jerry and get that gap analysis. Wow, that's really.
So that's been the single most effective tool for, I call that a business development tool, although you can use it during a sales meeting. At one time, I had a business owner and their general manager come in and take the assessment separately. And at that time, I was not scoring it in terms of a chart. I just turned it in an absolute number. On a score of 85, one individual scored the assessment a 6, the other one an 8. They had significant problems. But the thing is, they both recognized there were significant gaps.
Right. Well, you also, what you do is, and I've seen it because I witnessed your work. You actually help business owners to create such a gap analysis so they can use it as a tool for their business development, right?
Right.
So would that be mostly for the service industry, like other consultants or accountants or people that service industries, or can you also do it for other type of industries?
The marketing and sales engine that I've designed has got 6 gears and an oil pan, if you can think of an engine. It's got a strategy gear, a business development gear, a sales gear. It's got market analysis and analytics gear. It's got a channel alignment gear, and it's got a testing gear. And then it's got the culture, which is the oil. So if you look at that, that's basically a 7-dimension assessment. And that's universal. There isn't any industry that can't use that one. But I've also done them for service businesses like consulting. I've done them for recruiting. I've done them for energy companies, alternative energy companies, energy companies. I've done them for medical equipment companies. So
Wow.
but I always start with the general one because the general one gets the point across.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's very helpful. So Jerry, this is a question I like to ask because it helps entrepreneurs really to look at what they're doing and if there is anything that they can improve. What are the biggest mistakes that you have seen entrepreneurs do in relationship to marketing and sales?
Well, there are a bunch of fallacies. The biggest fallacy that I've seen is the everyone can use it fallacy. And that's typically for people who are introducing new products. The everyone can use it fallacy occurs when I ask them, who's your target customer? They say, well, we don't have a specific target because everybody can use it. But again, if you go back to the fact that not all people in all circumstances receive the same value quotient or experience the same value quotient from an offering, the best thing to do is to find that segment of the market and focus there. That way, you're likely to tap into the peer-to-peer networks. You're likely to get relevant case studies that will work within an industry or within a segment, because the kinds of problems that segments have or of market have is typically they are facing similar challenges rather than spending a lot of money. So the biggest mistake is they don't have that focus on the value quotient. They believe everybody can use it. And so they go into tactical marketing with a very broad, very supercharged program, and it falls flat. And when it falls flat, they've wasted all of their money and sometimes have to go, particularly if it's a startup company, for extra funding, which dilutes the ownership and creates all kinds of problems. Not only that, in the time that they've wasted, their competition has had an opportunity now to do it correctly. So that's the single biggest problem, is to expect tactical marketing to do everything that market strategy, business development, and sales isn't doing, and you can't depend on that. That's the most costly and the least impactful in general. Now, there are certain industries and circumstances which that is not true, but it costs nothing to see if there isn't some better way to do the market strategy and business development activities before you hire an expensive sales force or spend a lot of money on tactical marketing.
Great. Well, Jerry, that episode, as I thought, is a wealth of information, and I know that our listeners can use it. They can, you gave us great advice, and definitely I will encourage everyone to reach out to Jerry and take that gap analysis. Very important. In closing, Jerry, what motivates you? What got you into this line, into this profession? What motivates you helping so many entrepreneurs and business owners do better?
Well, it's a personal story, and I'll try to make it short. I worked as an engineer for a long time, and I was working as a manufacturing engineer, and I had a staff of, a dozen or more engineers and technicians. And the division I was in announced a layoff. Now, fortunately, my team was not affected by the layoff because we were working on some new products. But I saw a lot of direct labor manufacturing people being walked to the personnel office and out the door. And I thought, well, gee, this is really tragic. I wonder what caused it. And we've talked about this before, Adi. I'm interested in the why. I said, why did this happen? I discovered that the reason the business had struggled and needed to have a layoff was that someone in the marketing department had made a fundamental bad strategic decision about channel to market. Now, that decision and their inability to change it when it was recognized, change it quickly when it was recognized, told me that that is the single most important task and responsibility of a business owner and a manager, which is to find the best strategy, because there's a lot depending on it. The well-being of the employees, the shareholders, the managers, the communities in which they live. All of that gets impacted by one person making a bad strategic decision. So I was just starting graduate school at the time, in the evenings, and I decided that that was going to be the area of my focus. I was going to focus on market strategy, because if I could help people make one good decision, then the multiplicative impact was orders of magnitude.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Incredible. It is totally resonate with me. That's what I decided to do. What I'm doing is when I was working as an industrial engineer at a factory. It's also was a semiconductor manufacturing, and I was doing time study. And I realized that it's not the problem, it's not the machine itself, it's the operator. She looked miserable, she worked slow, and I realized that it's fixing the culture and fixing it so there can be, the employees are happy to come to work, they are well treated, they have their processes in place, they understand what they need to do, but introducing that human factor, it was for me like a separation between the machine and the people, right? Or the decisions that we make and how we make it. And that was a defining moment for me to really go into more of not just concentrate on the processes themselves, but see how it can be implemented and how it can have the human aspect into it as well. Right. So I understand those moments when we see something from the outside in and try to figure out like, why is it happening? Those are definitely very defining moments.
Yeah, they're epiphanies. In fact, my third book is called Navigational Strategy, and it starts exactly with that word, an epiphany. What is an epiphany? And what does it mean?
Wow.
I guess, over time, it has a motivating energy that it kind of injects in your heart and mind. And for me, it's lasted 30 years.
That's incredible. And that's what it totally shows in your work, in your care for your clients, and how much your clients appreciate you. So thank you very much for being a guest on my show.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.